Thanks for joining us for episode 43. We're up to Genesis 43, and I'm going to ask you to read through your own Bible account, again, whatever that might be at home. And here's my paraphrase for chapter 43. The brothers are now taking their second trip to Egypt. Why? Well, the famine continued, and Jacob told his sons to go back to Egypt to get more grain once the stuff that they had in their bags was gone. Judah explained that Joseph's warning was very clear in all of this. Don't come back unless you have your brother Benjamin with you. And he's saying he's not going to give us any food unless Benjamin is present. Jacob couldn't believe that this man had told them that they were supposed to bring the brother, but he also couldn't believe that the brothers would even mention that they had another brother at home. He said, "What are you doing to me? Sacrificing my youngest, most prized son." Judah then says he'd take the blame if anything bad happened to Benjamin. He reasoned that they could have gotten to Egypt and back twice by now. They've delayed this whole process so long, but they need to secure some food soon. Jacob finally acquiesces, and they load their bags with lots of gifts and asking for God's blessing on their journey and gifts for Joseph to make sure they send the food and let them go peaceably. When they got to Egypt, Joseph saw Benjamin, and he ordered his servants to prepare a meal for all of the men at his home. The brothers were frightened when they were actually taken to Joseph's house. They were wondering what he was going to do to them. They explained as best they could that the silver was returned to their bags, unbeknownst to them, the last time that they were there. And they were told everything was going to be okay, that their God had returned the silver to them. Joseph then brought Simeon, who was the brother that had been held back as collateral, back out to his brothers. And when Joseph arrived for the meal at noon, he asked them about how their father was doing. The brothers bowed down before Joseph, and they told him that their father, Jacob, was doing really well. And acknowledging Benjamin, Joseph had to go to a private room because he's getting so emotional about all of this. Seeing his full biological brother, Benjamin, it's more than he can handle at this point, and he has to go and get the tears out. And when he comes back, the meal was served, and Joseph, the brothers, and the Egyptians were all served at different places, separately from one another. The brothers were arranged from oldest to youngest, and Benjamin was given a portion of food 5 times larger than everybody else's. That is
They're probably
my paraphrase for Genesis.
Man, why does everyone love this kid?
Yeah.
Dad favors him, now this guy favors him.
That's part of the test. What is it about this guy and his brother who are so special, and our lives have been so terrible because his life is, directly, our lives have been bad because his life has been good.
Yeah.
That's what we hate.
Is it interesting that when Joseph says, well, God must have put that back in your bags, that he says God and not, so if he's Egyptian, they have many gods, right?
Right.
He didn't credit any, Egyptian,
Yeah.
deity, but he, I feel like there's many clues here that he's not maybe an Egyptian.
Right. There's certainly some peculiar clues that he understands them so well.
Yeah.
Referring to God, ordering them from oldest to youngest.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that detail is pointed out is, I think, specifically there to suggest to us, okay, he is demonstrating he has some kind of special knowledge about these brothers. It should dawn on them, okay, we're all middle-aged at this point. How does he know exactly, the order that we're in? It gives them a level of credibility and insight that, whatever. But yes, referring to their God is probably telling too. All right, so 3 devotional thoughts for the day then. Number 1, the family hits rock bottom. Jacob had, again, refused to let Benjamin go up until this point. Simeon is still in Egypt. The family's run out of food again. Everybody is in danger of starving. Judah makes the case that Benjamin has to go, so he has to, remember, it's kind of the type of Christ thing that we've talked about before, the messianic, one person must risk their life in order to save the entire group. So that's what Benjamin is here. Essentially, they all die. So, they're all, including Benjamin, is going to die if Benjamin isn't risked on the behalf of the family. And I think, the desperation and stuff like this sometimes creates perspective. What's really important in life and what are you willing to risk in the process? Jacob thought that he couldn't live without Benjamin. And when it comes time to like the whole family, like the whole lineage is going to die, he realizes, okay, I really don't want to live without Benjamin, but I can live without Benjamin. I can live without Benjamin. I can live without Joseph. The family name will go on. The nation of Israel will go on. I feel like I need them. I don't actually need them. And he's making that like desperation and creates that kind of perspective inducing understanding. And, Jacob's realizing that life is more than just one relationship. Life is more than just one person. And I think God sometimes allows us to go through these kinds of troubles and hardships specifically to distance us from our idols. Like, very clearly, Jacob's idol throughout his life was Rachel, then Joseph, then Benjamin. So, what has God done? Rachel dies first, Joseph is presumed dead, and he's clutching that much harder onto his next idol. And he's got to figure out, unless you search me and love me and pursue me more than anything else, life is going to be a misery anyways. So, I think it's usually not until rock bottom that people are willing to change behaviors. Sometimes this is certainly true of addictions, and even then, when they hit rock bottom, sometimes people would rather die than give up their addiction. But I've mentioned before the whole Dr. Phil line of I think Dr. Phil became one of the most influential talk show characters in the U.S. for many years. Basically on the premise of one line, he told people or asked people, how's that working out for you? So you'd have people come on his show. They would vent for 55 minutes about how miserable they were, how terrible life was. He'd ask them why they felt the way they did, why they thought the way they did, why they did what they did. And they would explain it all. Like, they had rationale for all of it. And then he'd say, okay, well, and how's that work for you? How does that work for you? And then they start crying because they realize my approach to life that I've been defending so staunchly for so long, it leads me directly to my misery. And so that's when people start to transform their way of thinking. And Jacob, you have been holding on to something other than God all these years as your source of meaning, purpose, and hope. Rachel, then Joseph, then Benjamin. And you're this miserable old character. What does that tell you? How's that working out for you? You need to let go of this and love God more than these things.
I'm trying to think of what in my life I'm like doing consistently wrongly.
That you're clutching onto too much?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
like what in my life could be looked at and say like, oh, it's clearly not serving you. That's not really working out for you. Like, what behavior is it?
Yeah.
I'll get back to you.
Yeah. I think so. Not only have I talked in the past about my depressions, but generally speaking, when I'm sober thinking enough to look back on it, and I don't think this is overly spiritualizing things to say that sometimes my depression are related to hyper desires for earthly things. So I want something so bad and think my wellness is so dependent on that one thing. And when I work, my butt off to get it, and I whether I get it or whether I don't get it, if I get it, I realize, oh man, it doesn't solve all my problems. And if I don't get it, then I feel like, oh, I'm not good enough no matter how hard I work to get it. And in either case, I get depressed. And it's not like, again, so maybe do I have something chemically inside of me that causes that or contributes to that? Yeah, absolutely. But from a spiritual perspective, like very clearly it's been related to my idols over the years, to things in life that I thought I needed to make me a worthwhile person. And like, so similarly, I think I can see God just kind of ripping my fingers off of those things again and again and again, because if I grab onto those too hard, it means I'm letting go of him too much. So
I've been thinking a lot about like comfort lately because when we found out that things were kind of going back to normal on June 1st, like for me specifically, instantly I thought like, oh, I was almost a little disappointed because like this has been so comfortable in the sense like there's really no pressure on me. I don't have to perform in a clinical setting in any way. There's really no expectations of me right now. Like, we're just at home together. And I've seen a lot of people say things like, yeah, like we're really enjoying this time. Like we just have spent time together. We take long walks. We play family games. And I feel like that's almost idol of like comfort, which I think Americans struggle with anyway. We don't want to be uncomfortable, is kind of like rearing its head. But I do think, like when you read through any of these stories, I do think God calls believers to be uncomfortable. I almost
Yeah.
think that's like a characteristic of the Christian life. Like
Yeah.
you have to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You can't get too comfortable like in the world.
Right. So, I mean,
And I feel like this period is just making me too comfortable.
one of those great hymn lines, I am but a stranger here, heaven is my home. Like, home usually is where people are most comfortable.
Yeah.
And if I am but a stranger here, when you're a stranger or living in exile, that's usually almost by definition, not comfortable or not as comfortable as home.
Yeah.
And so if we're not home, it means it's going to be more comfortable there, but also maybe it means that we shouldn't try to like kick up our feet like we are home right here.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
I think that the one of the things that self-quarantining does is if you are predisposed to being a little bit timid, what it allows you, and all of us have some level of that, what it allows you to do is have a convenient excuse to not put yourself out there and not try anything and not do anything because, well, we can't go out because we're quarantining and whatever. Now, again, the exact same, or another person could have the exact same motivation. They really want to go out, but, should be staying at home. But my point is, if you are predisposed to want to be comfortable and at home, it gives arguably a convenient excuse to do that.
And if you are predisposed to selfishness, which I think most of us are, or a good majority of people, this is all about you. You don't go out, you don't see anyone else, you're not doing anything for anyone else. It's all about like serving yourself and like what's going to help me get through this.
My world shrinks down
Yes.
completely, and I don't. It's kind of like, you can tell when you talk to certain people who I know in any kind of like visitation ministry. If you talk to somebody who is elderly and their world is just shrunk down completely, the only thing that they talk about generally or want to talk about is either memories or something kind of going on within the sphere of like their home. And it's partially because the world is shrunk down so small. Now, the problem with if you're the only person in your home is the only person that you then care about is the one in your home,
Yeah.
which is you. In other words, it becomes very easy to get self-focused if you're
Right.
not running into other people.
And even saying like, "Oh, I don't want this to end. This is enjoyable. This is comfortable," is so selfish because there are so many people who are like legitimately suffering right now. Like,
Right.
Are out of work, have no income, and it's just a nightmare for them.
Right, yeah. And I think as a general rule, the more you're allowed to be around other humanity, the more you're able to serve other humans. And that is a healthy, spiritually healthy sort of thing. So
I was talking to a friend and I asked her like how she was doing, and she said, "I am struggling so much right now I am being overcome by laziness and gluttony." And I was like, yeah, like so am I, and I feel like so is everyone during this time. But
Yeah.
she was able to just so articulate it so well. Like these are two sins that I'm definitely struggling with. Whereas I'm just like, oh yeah, of course I eat more. Like, meh.
yeah, it's a temptation. I mean,
Of
like,
course I watch a ton of TV. What else am I gonna do?
right, right. The less parameters you have, the harder it is to stay productive and those sorts of things too. So
But to actually like recognize the unhealthy behaviors, the sinfulness in them, I thought was really like eye opening.
Yeah.
Like that's a good reminder.
yeah, for sure. All right, so second devotional thought is your God has given you treasure is what Joseph specifically says to his brothers. They come back, they say, yeah, we got that silver that we were supposed to give you for the food that you gave us, the grain. And when we returned home on the way, we found that there was the silver still in our sack, and we don't know how this happened, and we don't want you to be mad at us. And Joseph says to him, yeah, your God must have given treasure in your bags here. And it's kind of it's not a lie. God had literally worked through Joseph to provide richly for them. I think part of the application in here is the idea. I think it's a good illustration of how God, when He provides for us, he very often provides for us through earthly means like family and the generosity even of strangers. And so, like, when somebody else is kind to me, whether it is if I'm a kid, it's my mother or father, or it's a spouse, or it's a friend, or it's, I mean, even a stranger, that is being God, that is God being kind to me. That is God ministering to me and serving me. And, it's not, a blessing that falls down out of heaven, but it's God working through the means of his people to take care of us. Just like God miraculously provided for the world at this time through Joseph. And I think we have a tendency to, like, not understand, not see the ministry that God is doing to us through other people. We want it to be like a direct line from God down to us. And when it comes through you to me, that is God. I guess is what I'm trying to say here. Which, by the way, one of the coolest things that has happened as far as helping other people during like pandemic times is a good chunk of you are studying this through St. Marcus right now. And I just want to throw in one more plug. If you go to our website, stmarcus.org, we have a COVID-19 response form. And one of the craziest things about this is several years ago, we started a benevolent fund. And like to get it up and running. And the idea was we didn't want to do a fund drive necessarily every time that somebody had something that we wanted to help out with. Like how exactly do you execute that? So we said, well, let's start a group with a committee in charge of members who help dispense the funds. And we'll start the fund with this amount of money. And it was, I think, maybe $10,000 or $12,000 or something like that. It has perpetually been like replenished over and over again, like in this crazy way, because members just keep giving to it. And the fact that we had that up and running during the pandemic time means we were able to give away a lot of money. And in fact, we've given away about double now what we started with in that fund. And we've now have in the fund about double what we've given away. In other words, what we currently have in the fund that we have used to give away to people who are struggling to make rent payments, utility payments, groceries, stuff like that, it's about 4 times what we started with. The more we give away, the more like it gets replenished. And to me, that is like, that's very clearly God working through his people to meet the needs of people as well. And it's just been such a cool thing to watch. So like, that is not just nice people, that is God moving, his spirit moving through his people to take care of others. Your God has given you treasure. Yep, it's not Joseph giving you treasure, it's your God has given you treasure. So, okay, third devotional thought, Benjamin's favored. And, throughout this whole second trip, Joseph very clearly is going to go out of his way to favor the younger brother Benjamin. Maybe just because he likes him more, but I think it's because, and it's his full biological brother, I think it's because this is a continued part of that testing process that we talked about in the last lesson. He's going to see, he knows Benjamin's daddy's favorite now. He knows how his brothers treated him as daddy's favorite, and he's going to see, okay, how are you going to treat it's not Benjamin's fault that he's daddy's favorite. How are you going to treat your brother Benjamin now? And essentially what he's having them do again is relive the experience from 20 years ago where they threw Joseph under the bus and lied to their dad. Are they going to do the same thing to Benjamin now yet again, breaking dad's heart and, doing whatever to Benjamin? And again, we go back to this testing thing. Tests from God. So whether or not Joseph is justified in doing this, I don't know that we can say. But that God is allowed to carry out this kind of testing it's not only okay, but it's necessary to see whether or not we've grown, that God allows stuff like this. I think one of the clear examples, a couple years ago I was preaching in Jesus calming the storm from Mark 4. And it was the first time I'd ever noticed that. So he teaches a bunch of parables right before. And he teaches his disciples all day. And then he says, I'm going to go up on the mountain to pray. You guys go ahead of me and cross the Sea of Galilee and go to the other side. And they end up being caught in this storm. And the idea is like, okay, well, who sent them in that boat? And who's the one that knew the storm was coming? It was Jesus. So Jesus was pushing them out into the storm after a day's worth of teaching. So like, that's the whole concept of like classroom testing is we'll teach you, and now let's see if you learned anything. And he's going to send them out. And I think that's the same, to some extent, the same way with us as well, that God teaches us. That's important. But you have to get out there too. Like you have to go out and go into the world, allow God to bring tests, and then grab onto his promises in the midst of it and act according to those promises. And that's the only way to fully get stronger. In other words, the Spirit works through the word, but there's a clutching on of your spirit onto that word. And then through testing, you find out whether or not it's become part of you, you know? I don't know. Any other thoughts on this? I'm still struggling a little bit with the testing process and looking at Joseph and seeing how much I agree with what he's doing
Yeah.
and seeing if I'm okay with it or not. And
Well, yeah, and even like going into the next chapter, we'll see how it continues. It's just like very elaborate.
yeah, it is.
Like, I don't know. Does he have nothing else to do?
He's got nothing more important to do, even though he's saving the world at this time.
He's in charge of literally everything.
Yeah, but it's hard to carry out a job when you're not well. And clearly this has become, like, by how many times he breaks down here, this is unresolved hurt, and this is pain. And he's probably kind of pushed a lot of this down over the years and tried to, I mean, it's the same way people psychologically deal with stuff today.
Does he have his own family at this point? Did it say they gave him the wives and stuff, right?
Yes.
He does.
Yep. So when Pharaoh appoints him, so like what exactly the sequence of time is, we don't know, but he gets married to one of the
the priest's daughters.
yeah, one of the priests of one of the Egyptian gods, one of her daughters or his daughters, and then ends up having the two sons. So. Any other thoughts on 43?
No, I don't think so.
Would you mind closing us with a prayer
Sure.
today?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that we can come together and do this study, and I am thankful for the times when we are uncomfortable. So I always think about my work and I think like, I just want to get to a point where I know I'm good at this and I can do it comfortably. But I don't know that that is always the best thing. When I get comfortable, I end up spilling a lot of things. So, I think that we need to, as Christians, start to become comfortable being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Like, start accepting the fact that we're going to need to be uncomfortable. We're going to need to take care of other people at the, with the sacrifice of our own time and money, which can be uncomfortable. We're going to have to pray with, and comfort people during difficult times, which can sometimes be uncomfortable. But pretty much all of the things you've called us to do and to serve and love one another at times can be uncomfortable. So please help us to recognize that it's during those uncomfortable times when we're other focused that's when your ministry can happen and when you can work through us to serve other people. So help us to be thankful for that, recognize that, and to not shy away from that. Amen.
Amen. Thanks again for studying today. We'll see you tomorrow for Genesis 44.